Hey, what's up everybody? It's Izzy from Powerlifting to Win, and I have to say that in all my time on the internet reading powerlifting message boards, talking about powerlifting, the one question that comes up more than any other is my program good? Now you could substitute the word my for 531, for starting strength, for the cube, for Shaco, for Ronnie Coleman's 16-week bicep blaster, for any retarded program that you can think of, or any really good one too. Instead of repetitively answering the same questions over and over again about what I think about each of these programs, what I wanted to do was make a video series that really gives you guys the tools to make evaluations on these programs yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay down the scientific principles, the scientific foundation behind powerlifting and powerlifting training and powerlifting programming. And once we've laid that foundation, I'll make a video about each of the popular programs, analyzing their strong and weak points. And of course, I'll also make my recommendation on what I think are good programs specifically for the purpose of powerlifting. The first thing we have to do is move past this false dichotomy where powerlifting programs are either good or bad. In fact, the results that you get on any given program are really more up to you than anything else. The best program in the world cannot instill in you work ethic, drive, consistency, passion. Those things are not found in a program. The best athletes get the best results often in spite of the way that they train and not because of how they train. Back to the point. Let's consider an untrained novice. Now I could take a completely untrained couch potato guy and I could increase his squat by getting him to just play basketball, play some sports. I could also take him to the gym and get him to squat heavy sets of 3 to 5 reps. Both are going to increase his squat max. However, it's pretty clear that actually getting the guy to go to the gym is going to be the better approach. And that's the thing, when I'm evaluating powerlifting programs, it's not a choice between good or bad. It's good, better, best. I mean, even as an intermediate trainee, you might make good gains on the Texas method, but would they be better gains than you would make on Jim Wendler's 531? Answering questions like that is one of my primary priorities in this programming video series. The next logical question is, well, how do I tell the difference between good, better, and best? Before we can even begin to answer that question, we have to establish what the whole point of a powerlifting program is. To improve your total. That is the whole point. The purpose of a powerlifting program is not to get shredded, become aesthetic. It's not to build muscle. It's not to do any of these things, okay? The purpose of a powerlifting program is to improve your total. You might get some of those other things as side benefits, but unless the program is explicitly designed to improve your powerlifting total, then maybe you should be looking elsewhere. Before we can begin discussing the tools that are going to allow us to make distinctions between good, better, and best, we need to talk about the process by which training actually works. Most of the current popular theories are based around Hans Selye's work on the general adaptation syndrome. Now, the general adaptation syndrome says that training works by a process of stress, recovery, adaptation. Consider a suntan. Let's say you have pale, white, pasty skin and it's exposed to the sunlight. Well, this sunlight constitutes a stress to the skin. In high enough doses, it's, toxic, it's potentially lethal, it can kill the skin cells. So what's actually happening is the skin is being exposed to this stress and damage happens. And once the skin is removed from the stressor, the sunlight, all sorts of signals have been given off that damage has occurred that now needs to be repaired. That's recovery. The body, in an attempt to prevent a stressor like this from having a similar negative impact in the future, actually builds itself up stronger and better than before. Your skin gets darker so that you're less likely to burn in the future. And that is adaptation. It's pretty easy to see how the dots connect in training as well. When you go to the gym and lift heavy weights, it causes tears in the muscle fibers, it sets off all sorts of hormonal responses, and fires off tons of different metabolic signals that all basically tell your body that damage has occurred and needs to be repaired. And when you take time off from the gym, you sleep, and you eat, recovery happens. A reward for going through this whole process is that we get stronger, we adapt. So the first foundational principle that I want to discuss is specificity. It's important to remember that the general adaptation syndrome is only going to work in our favor if we expose our bodies to stresses that are specific to powerlifting. So if you're engaging in routines that don't call for frequent squatting, benching, and deadlifting, or if they don't allow you to go heavy very frequently, your training may not be specific enough to maximize your results for powerlifting. Specificity is a topic unto itself entirely, and I cannot cover it fully in this video. However, it's absolutely imperative that you understand that if you want the best results as a powerlifter, you need to be doing a program that's explicitly designed for increasing powerlifting performance. You should not be doing a strength program. A strength program and a powerlifting program are two separate things. The body only adapts to the stresses it is exposed to. If you're constantly doing high reps, lots of cardio, tons of machine work instead of working with barbells, you shouldn't expect optimal results for powerlifting. Specificity is principle number one. The second principle that we're going to talk about is overload. Now, the general adaptation syndrome is only going to continue to work in our favor if we provide our body with doses of stress that are high enough to elicit the stress recovery adaptation response. For example, we've all seen the guy who comes in and benches the exact same weights for the exact same reps every single week, every single year. And not coincidentally, this guy never gets any stronger. Remember, the entire point of the general adaptation syndrome is to get your body to a point where a similar stressor in the future won't have the same impact. So if you're constantly doing the same reps and weights, well, your body's already adapted to that. You need to do more. You need to do more weights, more reps, more sets in order to overload your body. As your training career progresses as a powerlifter, there's no way around it. You're going to constantly have to lift heavier weights and do more volume in order to spur further progress. The more advanced you become, the bigger the dose of stress needs to be in order to elicit that stress recovery adaptation response. So principle number two is overload. You got to do more than you did before. As with everything in life, in powerlifting you either use it or you lose it. If you don't train, you'll get weaker. If you don't practice a lift, your skill at that lift is going to start to go backward. This is very important when considering overall fatigue management. For example, if you mismanage your deadlift workload, you may take so long to recover between sessions that you actually start to go backwards before you get another chance to pull. The larger the dose of stress relative to an athlete's recovery capacity, the longer it's going to take for that athlete to recover. In other words, timing here is critical. You want to make sure that you're hitting your body with that next dose of stress as soon as it's finished with the stress recovery adaptation response and before it has any chance to start going backwards. Likewise, you want to make sure that you're not hitting your body with that next dose before it has a chance to finish that process. Otherwise, you may overwhelm your body and you won't adapt at all. Don't listen to the extremists. Both undertraining and overtraining are real. So principle number three is fatigue management. And fatigue management is really the crux of programming. You have to time your stress doses and your recovery periods in order to maximize your gains over the life of a training cycle. One of the most often ignored principles of powerlifting programming is the law of individual differences. The law of individual differences simply states that everybody is going to respond slightly differently to any given training stimulus. Now that doesn't mean that benching is going to turn one guy into Arnold and another guy into a marathon runner. That's not the point at all. It just means that the exact adaptations, the exact demands imposed upon the recovery system, the tiny little differences are going to be there. You're not going to make the same gains that I make even if we do the exact same thing. Everybody needs a slightly different amount of volume to make progress. Everybody can handle slightly different overall workloads. Everybody benefits from slightly different frequencies. Everybody has slightly different leverages and biomechanics that play a part in movement selection. Frankly, I'm very adamant about the fact that if the training is not individualized, it's not optimal. Most popular powerlifting programs completely ignore principle number 4 simply because if they were to individualize it, you wouldn't be able to mass market the program. You couldn't give somebody a cookie cutter template to mindlessly follow. I hate to be cynical, but it's just not as marketable to offer a training system rather than a training program. Now, don't get me wrong, cookie cutter programs often work really well. They're still very specific, they still present an overload, and they still manage fatigue well. However, due to principle number 4, the law of individual differences, in my opinion, because these programs are not individualized, they're not optimal. Alright, let's recap what we've learned about the scientific foundations of powerlifting programming. For one, we're not going to think of programs in terms of bad or good. We're going to think of programs in terms of good, better, and best. When we start evaluating these programs, the entire basis of our evaluation is going to be the general adaptation syndrome, which simply states that training works by a process of stress, recovery, and adaptation. Our first programming principle was that of specificity. You have to train for powerlifting. You need to be doing heavy squats, benches, and deadlifts. Principle number 2 was overload. If you're not doing more than you did before, it's not going to constitute a stress. You have to do more weight, more reps, more sets. Principle number 3 was fatigue management. We have to get it down so that we're timing our doses of stress and timing our recovery periods to work synergistically to produce maximal gains. And principle number 4 was individual differences. We have to keep in mind that any training program needs to account for the fact that we are all different. We have different recovery ability. We have different schedules. We have different bodies. So if your training is not individualized, it's not optimal. Moving forward, in the next installment of this video series, I'm going to be talking about training variables. So frequency, volume, intensity, movement selection, and things like that. Because without a contextual understanding of these concepts and how they play a role in designing a powerlifting program, we can't really accurately analyze any popular program. Once we've established these basic training variables, then we'll start to go down the list one by one and analyze a lot of the more popular programs to see if they are good fits for a competitive powerlifter. If you guys liked the content, found it interesting or entertaining, please like, share, and send it out into the interwebs for me. Subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to check out powerliftingtowin.com for more great powerlifting information. Have a nice day.